Good evening. Will the members and our guests please take their seats? This meeting will now come to order. Welcome to the March meeting of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting. My name is Tom Byrne, RTM moderator. As all members have received a copy of the call of tonight's meeting, the reading of the call will be omitted. June 1944 was a harrowing month for at least two of our longtime members. It not only was the month that Lloyd Hull's ship was protecting the Normandy invasion fleet from U-boat attack, as well as itself being hit by shore bombardment. But June 1944 was also the month that former District 5 member Chuck Standard, then a young naval aviator assigned to the carrier USS Yorktown, played a significant part in the Battle of the Philippine Sea. This battle was the largest aircraft carrier battle in history. 15 American carriers, 9 Japanese carriers. The American task force was approaching the Japanese battle group from the east and did not know precisely where the enemy ships were located. Late in the afternoon of June 20th, a search plane radioed a location of the Japanese fleet 275 miles to the west. That was the limit of the strike range of the American task force. Admiral Mitcher decided to launch an all-out strike. After the first group of aircraft had taken off, a second message was received indicating the Japanese fleet was 60 miles further west than previously indicated. The first launch would be at their limits of fuel and would have to attempt landing at night on their return. Mitcher canceled the second launch of aircraft, but chose not to recall the first. Chuck Standard was among that group in the first launch. He was warned that he and his fellow American pilots may not have enough fuel for their return flight. After a 350-mile trip from his carrier, he searched a 75-mile area and finally located a Japanese heavy cruiser. Diving towards the ship's deck, he attacked, releasing his bomb as flak and gunfire burst around his plane. He later learned he had been credited with a hit on that carrier. But the worst part lay ahead for him. The sun was setting, and he had to fly back in the dark without benefit of radar or radio. Compass only. He set his compass east-northeast, and after hours of flying in the dark, finally reached a carrier, although not his own. His fuel needle on empty, he made a final turn, landed literally out of fuel as he touched down safely on deck. For his actions, Commander Standard was awarded the Navy Cross, which, next to the Congressional Medal of Honor, is the highest award given by the United States Navy for extraordinary heroism and combat. It is our honor and privilege to have Chuck Standard back with us tonight to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Chuck Standard.
Please, that's too much. Thank you. Good evening. And it's a beautiful day. Yes, it is. Because every day is a beautiful day. It's appropriate now for all veterans in civilian uniform and civilian clothes to give the military salute when honoring the flag, singing the national anthem, and delivering the pledge. Outdoors, but not indoors. Indoors, we do this. And also, during the pledge, many people have a comma between one nation under God. It's no pause, it's one nation under God. So now, everybody to pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chuck, for honoring us tonight. As all members have received a copy of the minutes of our January 22nd meeting, the reading of those minutes will be omitted. Are there any suggested changes to the proposed minutes of our January meeting? Hearing none and absent of, I'm sorry? All right, we do have a correction on our list of attendance. Stuart Ryder was present at the January meeting, and we will make that correction from District 11. Any further corrections to the proposed minutes? All right. Without objection, the minutes as amended stand adopted upon unanimous consent. I notified our district and committee chairs that based upon the reports we received from our districts, I would recommend the following organization of our call tonight. The following items, and I'm not doing it at this moment, but just to alert all of our members. I will shortly recommend, designate the following items to be placed on our consent calendar, and if they remain on that calendar, the only thing that we will hear tonight is my description of the resolution. There will be no committee reports and no discussion on consent calendar items. Those will be items 1, 2, 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, 16, 17, and 18. And all other items will be considered separately. That would leave items 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 13, 14, 15, and 19. So at this moment, I will designate the following items and for the consent calendar. The first is item number 1. It is a resolution appointing David Ayers to be a member of the Nathaniel Witherell Board with a term expiring March 31, 2016. Item 2 is a resolution appointing Margarita Albin to be a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission with a term expiring March 31, 2016. Item 5 is an appropriation of $20,000 for purchase of what is called an International Crane Truck. Item 9 is a resolution appointing Scott Salisbury to be an alternate member of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. The name of that agency is not fully spelled out. It is Inland Wetlands and Watercourses, one word, agency, with a term expiring March 31, 2017. The next consent calendar item I am designating is item 10. That is the appointment of Elliot Benton to be a member of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency with a term expiring March 31, 2017. Item 11, a resolution appointing Stefan Skoufalis to be a member of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency with a term expiring March 31, 2017. Item 12 is a resolution appointing Joseph Rogers to be a member of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency with a term expiring March 31, 2017. Item 16 is a resolution appointing Barbara Nolan to be a member of the Board of Social Services with a term expiring March 31, 2016. Item 17 is a resolution appointing Robert Greeley to be a member of the Board of Ethics with a term expiring March 31, 2016. And the last item that I am designating for the consent calendar is item 18, a resolution appointing Louise Puchel to be a member of the Nathaniel Witherell Board with a term expiring March 31, 2016. Is there any objection to the designation of any of those items for our consent calendar? Hearing none, those items are now before us on our consent calendar. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Consent calendar items 1, 2, 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, 16, 17, and 18, and proceed to poll your delegation. All right, that now leaves only the separate items remaining. We will take them in numerical order. Item 3 now comes before us. Item 3 now comes before us. Dave Thompson of our Public Works Department with that resolution.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM, Mr. Moderator. Resolved that the sum of $220,000 be, and the same is hereby appropriated to be added to capital account number Z345-5956013, known as Generator Program.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 3 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees that considered this item, beginning with Gordon Ennis, Chair of our Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen and guests. The committee reviewed this item. Al Manelli presented it. And we voted 11-0-0. The issue with this is that the town was able to purchase 2 generators for $109,000, even though they had budgeted almost $400,000. That's a good thing, but we did question why there was such a big miss, and also why it's necessary for these items not to be on the capital plan or to go through the CIP process. However, we recognized the emergency nature of it and decided to support the item. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Don Conway?
Hi, good evening. Public Works voted 11-0-0. The extra 2 generators that are now going to be ordered for are the Holly Hill and the animal shelter. So we all thought about it, and we did do the same thing as finance, question why we got them so cheaply, and hopefully maybe we can get a lot of more things cheaply. But that was our vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 3. Who from District 7? Don Hamilton, representing District 7, presenting a motion on behalf of that district.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, fellow members. And I am an enormous animal lover. I have an adopted golden retriever, so let's get that out of the way right away. District 7 is offering a motion to postpone item 3 until the April 9th general RTM meeting. Purchase of 2 standby generators for Holly Hill and the animal shelter in the amount of $220,000. This motion was approved by Public Works, of which I am a member, by a vote of 11-0-0, District 1 absent, as you just heard. However, further study of generator economics and the range of sizing options prompted a brisk discussion during the District 7 meeting. We concluded unanimously that a more detailed review of the town's generator program is in order. The district voted 16-0-0 to approve this motion. 4 members were absent. Questions raised at our meeting include, first, how many standby natural gas generators have been installed to date in the town, and can we forecast how many in total might be requested going forward? We propose that Public Works provide a prioritized listing of buildings and operations under consideration for supplemental standby power for subsequent review by Public Works Committee and the full RTM. Second, could the town better customize the mix of generators to fit the intended use, i.e. use smaller residential systems costing between $5,000 and $10,000, which are sufficient to power all the normal electric demands of a 3,000 to 5,000 square foot home, versus the $100,000 commercial system proposed for the 4,000 square foot animal shelter, and the need to meet standby requirements for an electric scale at Holly Hill. Details of the power demands were vague for the shelter, and there was no justification for a $100,000 system to power an electric scale at Holly Hill. A better analysis of specific uses, case by case, would seem in order. For example, is the shelter air conditioned? How much generating capacity is actually needed to power the furnace and keep a few lights on? And third, generators require rigorous and lifetime ongoing maintenance, either under year-to-year outside contracts or possibly by in-house staff. Maintenance cost and procedure should be included in the department's response. And finally, the request in the March 2013 call today comes on the heel of what proved to be an excessive prior request for $350,000 for 2 generators in the 12-13 budget, while the actual install cost was approximately $130,000. Is it just a coincidence that the latest request is exactly equal to the amount returned from the prior completed expenditure? It seems this is not the first time this has happened in town, so I'm just calling this out as a checklist for all of us to pay attention, I think. We believe thoughtful planning and forecasting of emergency power installations, identifying, prioritizing, and sizing would better serve the town and be more cost-effective. Thank you.
All right, so on behalf of District 7, you are offering a motion to postpone item 3 to the April meeting. All right. That being offered on behalf of one of our districts, it does not require a second. Discussion on the District 7 motion to postpone item 3. Ed Dudakis, District 1.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, members of the town meeting. Let me thank District 7 for their proposal tonight. I'm going to vote in favor of it. I urge you to vote in favor of it too. I have been struggling with this expenditure since our district meeting on Thursday night, at which time our very able member of the Finance Committee shared many of our questions and said that these were just answers they could not get in their committee meeting. My father lived in a 3,000 square foot house. We put in a generator about 3 or 4 years ago that cost $12,000. It runs everything. So I have a very hard time fathoming how 2 generators, one to cool off or warm up some animals and one to run an electronic scale at the transfer station, should cost $220,000. Downtown, they don't lose power for very long. So at the transfer station, why can a large standby generator that they just start up when they need to run the electronic scale be used? You can get that for $5,000, $8,000, $10,000. We got a lot of costs coming forward, ladies and gentlemen. You've seen what's going on at Greenwich High School, up to $150 million. And I think we've got to be very, very careful with these expenditures, and I suggest we start tonight with these generators. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to postpone? Mr. Von Kaiserling, District 8.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, our constituents, I drive a 1989 Ford Festiva. It costs me $400. It gets me back and forth and everywhere. I don't think that if we're buying police cars, we should buy a Ford Festiva. You get what you need for what you're doing. There's a big difference, as anybody who has any knowledge of rank, type, and kind. You buy commercial quality for commercial use. You buy residential quality for residential use. To conflate the two is really being very light thinking, number one. Number two, I am a little disturbed when we always seem to have a group in the RTM that comes late to the party, wakes up, and decides, oh, my gosh, this has been around. I agree there are problems with this. It probably should have been in the CIP list or something of that nature before and follow proper procedure, and I have concerns about that. But we are not talking about a 30 million MESA project or a 143 million DEP project or a 30-some-odd million Nathaniel Witherell project. We're talking about two simple generators. And why are we having them? For emergencies. Why are we having them for emergencies? We're having them for areas that are critical in an emergency so that they can operate for you and I and me to get things done so that we are, number one, safe, number two, less inconvenienced by the fracturing of nature, because we know in Greenwich we should have a geodesic dome over us. We shouldn't be affected by nature. We're too entitled. So if we're going to have something like Sandy, or we're going to have these nor'westers, and we're going to live in New England where we have snowstorms and all these things, then I think it's not only wise, but it was necessary and responsible for our administration to put these facilities in place. And this is not something where you go down to Home Depot and pick up a little generator and shove it in your garage and asphyxiate yourself. This is a commercial product. So let's treat this seriously, like we're talking about government and capital assets and commercial projects. If you want to talk about the CIP process, we can talk about that legitimately. But the fact of whether this is valued or not, I think is really being de minimis and a little bit light thinking. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to postpone? Mr. Thompson. Deputy Commissioner of DPW.
Just a few points I'd like to make on this item. I spoke with Al Manelli. He's not here tonight, so being our expert in this business, and anybody that knows Al knows that he is, he does a good job with the generators. He's been buying them and installing them for many years now, and they always seem to work very well. So I can say one thing. As far as the money goes, this is not a price that we've given you. This is a budget. Any money that's left over goes back into the account and back into the system. We would like to get started. Just one last point. There's a good lead time for these things. As mentioned, these are two critical locations. With the kind of weather we've been having, it'd be better to get these things in right away. We need about 6 months to do that by the time we get the design done and we get the system in place. So I would urge you to, I can assure you we're not wasting any money on this. We won't. And I would urge you to vote positively on this tonight so we could get started. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief James Hebe, Greenwich Police Department.
Mr. Moderator, RTM members, I was going to come up when I presented number 8 and say this was the first time I've been before this august body since 1978 when I did Boys State, but I guess I'm going to be up here more than once tonight. I just wanted to speak in support of the generator for the Animal Control Division. We, as recently as this afternoon, had a meeting with a number of parties involved in our disaster planning to continue our plan to provide for the animals who are owned by residents of the town. And one of the issues that came up is that we do have this animal control facility. It's a little over a year old. However, when it lost power, it only had battery backup for about 4 hours, and the Animal Control Division was full. We also had personnel actually staying in that facility to take care of the animals. So besides the power for that building, there are also a diesel and gasoline diesel and gasoline pumps adjacent to the building that can be utilized by all town vehicles, and also a tree department facility that adjacent to that area that we can use for overflow for the animal control divisions for more animals. So again, I just want to speak in support of it. It is something that was on the priority list internally, and I know that it's a little bit out of the ordinary to have it come back out of the CIP and with leftover funds, but I think it's for a good cause. I don't think that it's an excessive amount of money, and that it's a practical use that makes us more prepared for disasters. Thank you.
Thank you. David Tice, our selectman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen of the RTM, I have a little piece of legislation I'd like to read to you. It has to do with one of the components to the request, and it's a piece of settled law, and it's called the Pets Evacuation and Transportation Standards Act, otherwise known as PETS. It was a bipartisan initiative in the United States House of Representatives to require states seeking federal emergency management agency assistance, otherwise known as FEMA, to accommodate pets and service animals in their plans for evacuating residents facing disasters. Introduced by Congressman Tom Lantos of California and Christopher Shays of Connecticut on September 22, 2005. The bill passed the House of Representatives on May 22, 2006 by a margin of 349 to 29. Technically an amendment of the Stafford Act, it was signed into law by President George W. Bush on October 6, 2006. The bill is now public law, number 109-308. So I suggest that we need to seriously consider this component to this request and vote in favor of it. We want to continue to access FEMA funds for disasters and events of that nature. Thank you.
Further discussion on the District 7 motion to postpone item 3. All right, this being a procedural matter, I will call for a voice vote. If you are in favor of putting this over until our April meeting, you should vote yes. If you want to dispose of it tonight, you should vote no. All those in favor of postponing item 3 to our April meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Okay. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? District 7, motion to postpone item 3 and proceed to poll your delegation as quickly as possible. We will need to await the result of that vote before we can dispose of item 3. I do have the result of the vote on our consent calendar items. Those were items 1, 2, 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, 16, 17, and 18. Those in favor, 175. Opposed, 2. Abstaining, none. The consent calendar items have carried. I met with the district and committee chairs in February, and I want to thank Paul Curtis, who made a presentation to our group about the website that he had put together, and hopefully your district and or committee chair will utilize that to its fullest extent. We can widely distribute committee reports and any other communications. It is a wonderful resource, and I thank Paul for his work in putting that website together and for his presentation to our committee and district leaders last month. Now, I want to alert the body. Drew Marzullo, our selectman, alerted me right before the meeting began that he intends to make a motion tonight to discharge the referral, the committees that are considering the Mianus River Boat and Yacht Club lease, which we referred to our Legislative and Rules and Finance committees last month. While we're waiting for the vote on this, I will just tell you procedurally how this will be treated. We're not going to do it now. We will dispose of item 3 before we proceed with any other item. The Freedom of Information Act in Connecticut requires that any non-agenda item may be taken up at a regular meeting of any public body. This is a regular meeting of the RTM, and that provision applies to Mr. Marzullo's attempt to place before us an item not on our agenda. And before we can take up a non-agenda item, we must vote by a 2/3 majority of those present and voting to do so. So when we do get around to considering Mr. Marzullo's suggestion and motion, we would first see if we have a 2/3 majority vote. If there was such a supermajority in favor of taking that non-agenda item up, we would then proceed by way of a motion to discharge a committee, which also has a 2/3 requirement, or majority of the entire membership, which would be 116, whichever is less, I believe. And those motions will be debatable, so I do anticipate that will be coming before us, but in the proper order. So I just make sure that you do not leave before we consider that proposal. May we see the Chair of District 10, please? All right, we have the result of the vote on the District 7 motion to postpone item 3 to our April meeting. Those in favor, 93. Opposed, 89. Abstaining, 2. That motion to postpone has carried. So item 3 has now been disposed of. All right, at this point, I will recognize Mr. Marzullo for the limited purpose of offering a non-agenda item. But we will not, if there is a 2/3 majority to take that up, we will not consider that until the end of our meeting. But this will allow, if we don't take it up, then those who are here for it would not need to wait needlessly. Drew Marzullo, our selectman. Mr. Von Keyserling, what is your point of order? Point of order is a claim that there is some violation of rule currently occurring. What is your point of order?
Mr. Moderator. I believe that what the selectman is addressing is a matter that is already before the RTM in the June call, and of course, we have referred it to a committee, but it still belongs to the RTM and is before us. We cannot act on it according to Robert's rules until the committee disposes of it or is disposed of. Therefore, the item is active before us as old business, and I believe in proper procedure, old business precedes new business. Therefore, I would say that we can take it as immediate.
Therefore, I didn't hear the end of that.
Therefore, I believe the correct approach of the RTM would be to take up old business before new business.
Okay, well, I am making an executive judgment to alert those who are here on Mr. Marzullo's issue whether or not we are going to take it up tonight. We are not going, as I said, if there is a 2/3 majority to take up a non-agenda item, we're going to only take that vote. If you were arguing, or if you were making the point of order that such a motion is not in legal order, regardless of the time it is made, I will find that that point of order is not well taken. Robert's Rules does provide a procedural device to discharge a committee to which something was referred. And the only way to reach that is to first, because that's not on our agenda tonight, is to take a vote under Freedom of Information Act as to whether we will even consider a motion to discharge a committee. So, excuse me, I have ruled, you do not have the floor. Mr. Marzullo. Please sit down, Mr. Von Keyserling. You do not have the floor. Mr. Marzullo.
My point of order, sir, which was the process and the order in which we addressed this thing. It wasn't about FOI or any of that thing. I'm saying that
Mr. Von Keyserling, we follow rule of law here. There is a chair of the meeting. You do not have the floor. I'm sorry, Mr. Von Keyserling. Mr. Marzullo, proceed.
Okay. Mr. Moderator, just a quick question. Once I read this proposed motion, will I be able to explain my reasons prior to the? I know it's a non-debatable item, but will I be able to explain why I'm?
You will make your motion to take up a non-agenda item, and if there is a second, there will be discussion on that.
Okay, thank you. Members of the town meeting, guests, I move that the Finance and Legislative and Rules Committee of the RTM be discharged of the referral of item 7, MRYBC lease on the January 2013 RTM call, and that the resolution in item 7 now be taken up for consideration. That is the motion.
All right. As I said, I am not accepting the motion to discharge, but because that is not on our agenda, we would first require a 2/3 majority vote to even consider that. So is there a second to the motion to take up a non-agenda item? Second. It has been moved and seconded to take up a non-agenda item, that being the referral of the Mianus River Boat and Yacht Club lease to 2 of our standing committees in January. Discussion on that motion to take up a non-agenda item. Mr. Marzullo.
Mr. Moderator, members of the town meeting, I make this motion and ask for your support simply because this would allow item 7 on January's call, the Boat and Yacht Club lease, to return back to you, this body, for a vote tonight, next month, or whatever you deem as a body. If returned to the floor as a body, the RTM has the specific authority to amend it, to vote on it, to vote up or vote down. The Board of Selectmen will continue to evaluate each individual lease on its merits, and the RTM has been charged with the same. At January's meeting, the Moderator Pro Tem's request to refer item 7 was done so without a specific mission, and it was passed without any specific time mandate to return it. So in theory, the MRYBC lease can be left in limbo for a time uncertain. The fact is, the Mianus Club are good tenants, performed above what their lease requires and improved a town mudflat. The referred lease has been bumped from Finance and the Legislative Committee to an unforeseen joint subcommittee. The joint subcommittee has had 2 months and has yet to discuss the Mianus Club lease. The joint subcommittee has had a series of embarrassing breaks of rule and proper notice, and this pause in action will help regain the public respect that is warranted for this important issue. RTM constituents and boat members are being held hostage in a struggle over future town lease policy provisions. Retroactive legislation is unfair and bad practice. I ask you to once again support my motion to make wrong right. Separate the two issues, and this is a way to do so. Discharging the committee will not, I repeat, will not prevent a future committee from examining lease policy and go forward. And if you think a committee should go forward, then do so. Form a committee, form 2 committees, form 3 subcommittees. I don't personally have vested interest. I don't have to attend all these meetings, but at least it would be doing so after the fact and not midway through the process. And for anyone who has said this is not about the yacht club, come on. Thank you.
Further discussion on the Marzullo motion to take up a non-agenda item. Irv Porter, District 6. Chairman of the subcommittee established by the Legislative and Rules and Finance Committee to consider the referral.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Mr. Selectman. I think that that's a productive way to focus on this issue for this body. And I do for the simple reason that if you are a member of the Mianus Boat Club, or for that matter, any other boat club, and you read item 7, you would expect that our committee would have responded to it. In fact, that was not what we responded to. After 5 meetings, when we explained to the members of the boat club or boat clubs that that was not our charge, that our charge given to us by both the Finance Committee and the Legislative and Rules Committee was to draft a mission statement and then follow through on that mission statement. That's what we've done. But at that 5th committee, by the time the 5th meeting had occurred, we had gone back to the chairs of our respective Finance and Legislative and Rules Committee, specifically asking them to do what you just suggested we do. And we were given the blessing to go forward in that regard. But for everybody's benefit, to kind of clear the air on this issue, I'd just like to read you what the draft mission statement was that our group will propose and has proposed to our respective committees. It hasn't been voted upon. Nothing that we have done in the committee has been voted upon because it's all been in the discussion and drafting stage. So this is what we've been doing since we were formed. It is the mission of this joint subcommittee to develop a policy in quotes. That's a normative term. It doesn't mean that we will draft a policy. Whether we use the word policy or not has not been decided upon. That will assist the town of Greenwich in determining whether to approve any agreement, including leases, licenses, and management and operating agreements that the town proposes to enter into or renew with individuals and non-governmental entities for the utilization of town-owned or town-leased real property. Now that may sound like a lot of legalese to everybody, and it is. But it is the focus, and it's the reason that it's taken us as long as it has to get to where we are, for people to understand that this is totally separate. That charge is totally separate from the Mianus Boat Club lease and other boat club lease issues. So in that context, I can't, in good faith, suggest that you vote for or against that. I think that that's a judgment call. And the only clarification that I would like to ask through the moderator is that if this proposal that Mr. Marzullo has put before you is adopted, whether or not that essentially discharges the obligation of the joint subcommittee.
All right, first, we are merely considering his motion to add a non-agenda item. If that is approved by a two-thirds majority, we would later consider a motion to discharge the committees to which this was referred. And that requires a two-thirds majority, essentially. If that were to be adopted, the item would come before us tonight. And the referred committees would have been discharged from what was done in January. Further discussion, Mr. Porter?
No, sir. Thank you.
Further discussion on Mr. Marzullo's motion to add a non-agenda item. Doug Wells, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a bit confused by what Mr. Marzullo is asking for here, given the history of my interaction with the Select Board's office since our last meeting. As you know, the matter was referred to us, us being the Finance Committee and the Legislative and Rules Committee, to address item 7. That was done in the context of a lot of concern that members of the RTM had concerning the fact that this lease was being looked at individually and not part of a policy concerning leases within the town, which we had asked the Select Board to adopt over a year ago. So, yes, we referred item 7, but as most of the speakers indicated, certainly those on the Finance Committee that spoke, they were concerned that we had no policy in place to look at all leases, including this Myannis lease. 2 days after our meeting, I got an email. If I had been notified ahead of time, if we'd had the courtesy to know that this item was coming up, I would have brought the email so I could have read from it. But Mr. Tessie's assistant sent me an email to me, and I believe to Gordon Ennis as well, asking when the Finance Committee and the Legislative and Rules Committee, or the subcommittee that was going to be formed, could come before the Select Board to let us know what our policies were going to be with respect to leases, including the Myannis River lease. We referred, I got back to him and said that we weren't going to be able to meet their next Thursday meeting. I think he'd given us either a week or 2 weeks to get back to them on that, and that we intended to look at it, develop a policy, and then use the policy guidelines to look at the Myannis River lease. So I'm not sure why it is that there is now this insistence on going forward on the lease. There's been no further explanation as to why this is now an emergency. So I would urge you to turn down this motion and not vote in favor of it.
All right, well, I will simply respond, Mr. Wells, to say that it is my hope that our membership concurs with you and believes that the RTM has proceeded in an organized fashion to address a complicated issue. I expressed my displeasure when I heard for the first time tonight, without courtesy of any advance notice, that this would be made tonight. And so I'm hopeful, without taking up any further time, that the body will just reject it out of hand, but I reserve the right to then discuss. If we must, on a motion to discharge the committee, I will speak further on this. Further discussion on Mr. Marzullo's motion to take up a non-agenda item. All right. Will the district chairs please mark your voting? Mr. Von Keyserling, District 8.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is with extreme displeasure that I must address you. And the feeling may end up being mutual. First of all, I would kindly request that if the moderator wished to opine on any item before us, that he remove himself from the podium and come down to the floor. I object to that heartily as being prejudicial, number one. Number two, it seems to me that I'm in charge of breaking up meetings for not following orders. I don't know why I'm becoming the parliamentary hitman, but
All right, Mr. Von
somebody else will
Keisling,
not.
you were
Sir,
recognized.
I have
Excuse
not-
me, Mr. Von Keisling.
I have not
You were
finished.
recognized to speak on a motion to take up a non-agenda
I
item.
am speaking
Let's
on the motion,
speak,
sir. The
because I
previous
think-
speaker was actually speaking on the motion to discharge, and you allowed him that latitude.
You are,
So I hope you
are
will give
talking
equal
about
privilege, sir.
personal activities you have
I am not
engaged in.
talking about personal
That's not
activities,
relevant.
I'm talking about official activities, and they are within the realm of our discussion, sir. If you wish to hide behind some title,
Mr.
I
Von
wish you would come
Keisling,
to the
if you
well
do
and we
not
can
proceed,
discuss
I will
this.
take the floor away from you.
So, let me continue. This seems to be, as we've come from the beginning, this whole question of the Miners Yacht Club lease, as they have been told, the club many times, by many of the opponents, that this is not about them and it's not personal. It has nothing to do with the club. You're wonderful people. It's a great lease. We have some concerns in general about how the town does leases. We want a lease policy. It basically came out in the report in the last meeting that all of the committees approved this lease overwhelmingly, except for the Finance Committee, and the report from the chairman of the Finance Committee said basically, while we have these concerns about policy as such creating, and the RTM's SOM of last 2 years ago, the lease itself is pretty much okay, and I probably would approve it, but we're at the point, we have to put a stake in the ground somewhere, and we're going to do it here. That's basically what was said. So this is about the battle between the selectmen and the RTM over a policy on leases by the town. Now, that's fine. That's a policy decision the RTM has every right to involve in. Do not hold our constituency, the people we serve, hostage to an internecine battle between us and the selectmen. Not between me and the selectmen, but some of us and the selectmen. First of all, now, we have created a committee that's been cobbled together. It wasn't the committee that we had asked for, which was the Finance and the Legislative and Rules Committee. It was a joint committee put together by some of the members, three of which were the main proponents behind making that motion. I would think that's not a balanced and fair committee. It certainly wasn't taken so by your constituents, and it isn't so by some of the public. I think we put ourselves in an awkward position. Now, if we want to do policy, I'm all for that. What I would suggest you do is what we should do and what the RTM is set up to do. We create, as we have in the past, a special RTM committee on policy and guidelines for town leases. That's fine. We should get that settled. We should have clear in our minds so we're all on the same page. I agree with that. But let's have it an RTM committee chosen by the RTM and fairly balanced by all points of view so that we can propose something that's workable to the RTM. I guarantee whatever comes out of the situation we're talking about now, if anything comes out of it, will probably be more controversial than it went in. Number one, it already has been. Number two, we are not, in effect, discharging the committee chaired by Irv Porter. That joint subcommittee is a joint subcommittee which was appointed by the two chairmen, not even by the committees. We're discharging the Finance and the Legislative and Rules Committee of this item. The Finance and Legislative and Rules Committee, as you know from our process, are perfectly welcome to have any committees they want to study any subject they want, and they can go on forever with a joint subcommittee independent. That's fine, because it doesn't report to us, that joint subcommittee. It reports to the chairman, technically, of those committees, not even the committees. So this is so removed from our referral that it is not.
Please state your point of order.
Perhaps because the gentleman hasn't read the item.
All right, Mr. Von Keisling, you are out of order. You are out of order, Mr. Von Keisling.
Well, sir, it seems
Now,
that I am
finish up.
generally that way.
I believe this
So
is
what I am
germane.
saying is that
We
if
have
the RTM wants to get
We have no
out,
limit on debate.
if the
so he is
RTM
entitled
wishes
speak
to-
for 10 minutes.
if the
He is up to
RTM,
5 minutes.
if the
So I will allow
RTM,
him to continue.
if the
as long
RTM
as he
wishes to
does
get out
not
of this difficulty
Go
and
out of order again.
embarrassment.
Mr. Von Keisling, when I am speaking, you are not to speak.
Oh, thank you,
I am
sir.
ruling on, everyone gives you the courtesy of listening to you.
And I give them the
And
courtesy,
you-
sir.
You must listen to others when they speak. A motion, a point of
saying I
order was
must
made,
listen
and
to
I am
somebody
ruling
who
on a point
interrupts
of order.
me,
Mr.
sir?
Von Keisling,
I listened to somebody interrupts me, is what you're saying, sir.
You don't know how to follow rules, Mr. Von Kaiser.
Oh, I guess that's true, sir. I am the
you're-
paradigm of not following rules. You're correct.
Mr.
There are
Von
no better
Kaiser,
examples.
finish
Thank
your
you,
point.
sir.
Further discussion on Mr. Marzullo's motion to add a non-agenda item. Mr. Dudakis, District 1.
Mr. Moderator, I move the previous question.
All right. The motion for the previous question has been moved and seconded. It is a motion to cut off debate, and it requires a two-thirds majority to pass. If you are in favor of immediately proceeding to vote on the Marzullo motion to add a non-agenda item, you should vote in favor when I call for the vote. If you would like to hear further discussion, you should vote no. All those in favor of closing debate on Mr. Marzullo's motion to add a non-agenda item, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Marzullo, motion to add non-agenda item, and proceed to poll your delegation. We can continue with the business of the meeting since we are not going to act on the results of that until, if at all, until later in the meeting. Item number 4 now comes before us. May we have the resolution on that item? David Thompson, Deputy Commissioner of Public Works.
Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. Resolved that the sum of $100,000 be, and the same is hereby appropriated to be, added to capital account number Z345-59560-13, notice 1327 King Street demolition.
Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 4 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees that consider this? Beginning with Alexis Vulgaris, Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Good evening. Last Tuesday, the Health and Human Services Committee met with Charlie Tufts, Executive Director of GEMS, as well as John Strong, Chief Financial Officer, to discuss item number 4, the demolition of a house located at 1327 King Street. The house is owned by the town of Greenwich, but is used by GEMS. GEMS currently bases and dispatches one of their ambulances, Medic 4, from this location. It should be noted that GEMS is not a town department and does not pay rent to the town to use this property. Rather, the use of the property is part of an in-kind services arrangement provided to GEMS from the town in exchange for their emergency medical services. Prior to Hurricane Sandy, the house was already in need of major renovations. It needed a new roof, had mold issues, and was not up to current building code requirements. After Hurricane Sandy, the building became uninhabitable. The temporary tarp covering the roof blew off, and the building sustained additional damage, such that GEMS could no longer stage Medic 4 from this location. Immediately after the storm, Greenwich Woods offered GEMS a temporary 2-week location to dispatch from, and when that invitation expired, GEMS brokered an arrangement with the Boy Scouts to use their Seton reservation through the end of April. There is no possibility to extend the Seton location arrangements beyond April 30th, as the Scouts need their full access to their buildings for their own programs and initiatives. Ideally, GEMS and the town would like to have Medic 4 return to 1327 King Street. However, that can only be accomplished by demolishing the current structure and installing a temporary trailer on the property. Long-term, it is unclear what the intentions of the town are for the property. It's been considered a site for a new firehouse, though it now appears that the site might not be large enough to accommodate all of the necessary fire equipment. Ms. Tufts did indicate that she and the town have worked diligently to try and identify additional sites along the King Street corridor to try and house Medic 4, but no opportunities have presented themselves. For example, schools located along King Street do not want an ambulance dispatching from their property on a permanent basis. Ms. Tufts also noted that since Medic 4 was put in place, GEMS has been able to cut extended response rates, those calls that exceed 8 minutes, to respond to by 50 to 60%. The location of the King Street unit has been very valuable when it comes to reaching Greenwich residents living in the northwest sector who require emergency assistance in a timely manner. Given that the addition of Medic 4 has reduced extended response rates times, and that it appears that there is no other suitable location presenting itself to either the town or GEMS to relocate Medic 4 for the foreseeable future, Our vote was 11-01, with District 2 abstaining to support this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Gordon Ennis with the report of our Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. The Finance Committee actually considered item 4 and item 7 at the same time. So with your permission, I'll report on both. All districts except District 6 were represented. The votes on both item 4 and item 7 were 10-01. District 2 abstained from both votes. The details are pretty much as described in the explanos. The committee encourages you to vote in favor of these items. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Conway, Vice Chair of our Public Works Committee.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also did the same thing. We met with finance and so forth, and we took pretty much a discussion on 4 and 7 up at the same time. 4, our vote was 11-0-0. However, it was discussed and has been for a long time as to why in the world we even bought this piece of property in the first place. Because, quite honestly, it wasn't big enough for the firehouse and GEMS. And if they had researched it, the town that is, they would have found that out, and that the septic system wouldn't hold everything. So we kind of bought a pig in a poe. But we're stuck with it. So the house is no good now. It does have to come down. It's a liability. And our vote was, again, 11-0-0. 7, however, we voted 9-0.
We are going to take that up later. Do you want to give your report then?
No, I'll just save time. It won't take long. 2 and 4, myself and District 4 voted against it, primarily because it did come out. There was a gentleman on the Finance Committee that mentioned something about FEMA having all these trailers, and I do remember seeing that FEMA was trying to get rid of trailers from different things for nothing. All we'd have to do is go find them or go to their destination, pick them up, and drive them back. So to spend another $47,000 for what maybe we could get a free trailer for, we decided to vote this down, the 2 and 4 district, because we just felt that Public Works should at least take the time, make the phone call, and find out if it's true. And so that's how we stood on it, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 4.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Tuthill.
I move that any further debate tonight be limited to 3 minutes per speaker per item.
All right. It has been moved and seconded to limit debate for the balance of the evening, that limit being 3 minutes per speaker per item. Do you mean call item?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if there are subsidiary motions, a total of 3 minutes, no matter how many. Okay. A motion to limit debate is not itself debatable, and it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of Mr. Tuthill's motion to limit debate for the balance of the evening to 3 minutes per speaker per item, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. All right, further discussion on item 4. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 4, and proceed to poll your delegation. All right. Item number 6 now comes before us. May we have the resolution on that? Once again, David Thompson, Deputy Commissioner, Public Works.
Good evening again. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Item 6, resolve that the sum of $1,945,000 be, and the same is hereby appropriated to, be added to Department of Public Works operating accounts as it appears in the call.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 6 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees that considered this? Gordon Ennis with the report of our Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee met and listened to Bill McCormick, who presented this item. The vote was 11-0-0. District 6 was absent. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Conway, do you have the Public Works Committee report? Don Conway, Vice Chair of our Public Works Committee.
We're talking about item, I'm sorry, I was...
Item number 6.
Number 6.
The appropriation of $1.9 million.
Yes, our vote was 11-0-0. We had a little bit of a discussion on the highway overtime services 375 number, because actually what they're doing is they've got in there $100,000, which they really need, which I guess we spent, that would cover us between now and June. So whether FEMA will pay that or not, I doubt it. But if you do all the numbers and everything else, it still comes out that we won't be in too bad shape. I think if I got the numbers correctly, the most we're going to wind up with is about $317,000 that we're going to wind up paying out of this almost $2 million. So it's not a bad deal for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 6. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 6, and proceed to poll your delegation. I have the result of the vote on the Marzullo motion to add a non-agenda item to the call tonight. Those in favor, 60, opposed 122, abstaining 1. That motion has failed. Item 7 now comes before us. Carolyn Baisley, Director of Health.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, item number 7, resolved that the RTM approves the sum of $47,111 as an additional contribution appropriation to allow GEMS Emergency Medical Services, Inc., GEMS, to purchase a trailer to temporarily house Station 4 personnel, added to the count A44057225 as it appears in the call.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 7 has been moved and seconded. Alexis Vulgaris, Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Good evening. I'm not sure I have much additional history to add to this item as it's so closely aligned with item number 4. With number 4. Again, Ms. Tufts and Mr. Strong were with us. If we agree that we would like to demolish 1327 King Street, or the house on it, then GEMS would like to install a trailer to house medic number 4. The proposed trailer is 12 feet by 60 feet, can tie into existing well, septic, and electricity lines, and has enough space to adequately house the staff assigned to this location on a 24-hour basis. Ms. Tufts stated that any trailer installed on the property should have a life expectancy of at least 3 to 5 years, which should provide the town enough time to consider what the best long-term uses are for this property, as well as provide GEMS a site in which to stage its staff. Our vote was 11-0-1 with District 2 abstaining. Thank you.
Thank you. We have previously heard the reports of the Finance and Public Works Committee. Discussion on item 7. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 7, and proceed to poll your delegation. Item 8 now comes before us. We have the police chief here. All right, item 8 now comes before us. James Heavey, Police Chief, Greenwich Police Department.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, resolved that the sum of $155,272 is hereby appropriated for the general fund balance to the Greenwich Police Department overtime services account to offset overtime expenses incurred resulting from Superstorm Sandy.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 8 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees that considered item 8, beginning with Gordon Ennis, Chair of our Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, the vote by the Finance Committee was 11-0-0. This is a pretty straightforward item. We should support it.
Thank you. And do we have the report of our Town Services Committee to be given by its chairman, John Harkins?
Just in time. Excuse me. We reviewed the reasons for the overtime and the inability to plan for it. In short, there appears to be no effective way to budget for such items, and we approved the item 11-0-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Discussion on item 8. All right, I'm not going to call for this question yet. Let's allow our district chairs an opportunity to. We currently have 3 votes outstanding, so why don't we give them a chance to clear their ballots. All right, we have the result of the vote on item 4. That was the appropriation for demolition at King Street. Those in favor, 168, opposed 16, abstaining 2. That item is carried. So at the moment, there are 2 outstanding votes, so why don't we continue? I ask the district chairs to please mark your voting cards item number 8 and proceed to pull your delegation on that appropriation. The next item to come before us is item 13. That is a nomination from the Board of Selectmen. Do we have that resolution? David Tice, our Selectman.
Mr. Moderator, thank you again, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM. Be it resolved that the following named person nominated to the Board of Selectmen, by the Board of Selectmen, be appointed an alternate member of the Inland Wetlands Watercourse Agency for a term expiring 3/31/17, Mr. Jacob Schoendorf.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of that resolution? Resolution on item 13 has been moved and seconded. Peter Berg, Chair of our Land Use Committee, with that report.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, fellow members, guests. The Land Use Committee met last Monday night. All 12 districts were represented. Mr. Schoendorf is being nominated as an alternate on the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. He's filling an opening created by Mr. Rogers. That's item 12 that we approved. Mr. Rogers was promoted to a full member, filling the vacancy of John Conti, who has left the agency after years of distinguished service. So we had all of the nominations, 5 of them up at the same time. Mr. Schoendorf is separate here, I assume, because he's the new nomination to the agency. The panel reminded us that Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency does not represent the residents of Greenwich. Rather, the agency represents the wetlands of Greenwich and all the critters and plants that live there. The wetlands regulations were developed by the state of Connecticut and have been adopted by the town. Mr. Schoendorf is a civil engineer. He has a record of service to the town, including service on a school building committee, the Greenwich Library, the Retired Men's Association. We voted separately on each of the candidates, and each of our vote, including Mr. Schoendorf, was 12-0-0.
Thank you. Mr. Von Keyserling with the report of our Appointments Committee.
The Appointments Committee met with Mr. Schoendorf last Tuesday. We voted for him 12-0-0 for all the extraordinarily good reasons that Chairman of Land Use mentioned.
All right, discussion on item 13. Will the district chairs please mark your voting? I'm sorry, Mr. Clark. Okay, you are correct. Let's note this is a substitute resolution correcting the name of the agency. Correct, Mr. Tice? It is Inland Wetlands and Watercourses, one-word agency. That's correct. All right, thank you, Mr. Clark. So this is a substitute resolution. Discussion on that substitute resolution. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item number 13, and proceed to poll your delegation. We have the result of the vote on item 6. Item 6 is the appropriation of $1,945,000 for a variety of different public works activities. Those in favor, 182. Opposed, 1. Abstaining, 0. That item has carried. The next item to come before us is item number 14, another nomination. Drew Marzullo with that resolution.
Hello again. With my last request, I hope this nominee has a better outcome, but anyway, here we go. Stephanie, please. Okay. Resolve that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be reappointed a member of the Commission on Aging for a term expiring 3/31/16. Stephanie Palomino.
Stephanie Palomino. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 14 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees on this? Mr. Von Keyserling for the Appointments Committee.
Ms. Palomino, I think is the proper pronunciation, is having some surgical work done on her. We could not visit with her and interview, so we expect to have her before you again. I would like to postpone this to the April meeting.
All right, is that on behalf of your committee?
Yes, sir.
All right. That being a motion to postpone item 14 offered on behalf of the Appointments Committee does not require a second. Is there any objection to that motion to postpone item 14 to our April meeting? Hearing none and absent objection, Mr. Marzullo is now 0 for 2.
Zero for 3, and I'm going to give this to Dave Tice to do.
All right, item 15.
You want to, hopefully I have better luck,
15 that
Drew.
comes before us. Dave Tice, our selectman.
All right, thank you, Drew. Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a member of the Commission on Aging for a term expiring 3/31/16, Mr. Stephen Katz.
Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 15 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Von Keyserling?
The Appointments Committee was unable to interview Mr. Katz in time for this meeting, and we voted to recommend postponement to the April meeting.
Is there any objection to the Appointments Committee motion to postpone item 15 to our April meeting? Hearing none and absent objection, that motion stands adopted upon unanimous consent. And the final item to come before us tonight on our agenda is item 19. You know this is going to be postponed as well, right?
So, resolved that the following named person nominated the Board of Selectmen be reappointed to the Southwestern Regional Planning Agency, Robert Burns.
Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 19 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Von Keyserling?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Appointments Committee was unable to meet with the gentleman, and we voted to recommend a postponement to April.
All right, absent objection, that motion to postpone item 19 to our April meeting stands adopted upon unanimous consent. All right, that concludes the call for tonight's meeting. We do have some outstanding votes, so we will need to await the tally on those votes before proceeding to adjourn. All right, the vote on item 7. Those in favor, 142. Opposed, 40. Abstaining, 3. Item 7 has carried. We have the result of the vote on item 8. That is the appropriation of $155,000 for the Greenwich Police Department overtime. Those in favor, 182. Opposed, 1. Abstaining, 0. That item has carried. Is the chair of District 12 or secretary here with the attendance card for District 12? We are looking for that. All right, we have the result of our final vote. This is item 13. This was the appointment of Jacob Schondorf to be a member of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses One-Word Agency. Those in favor, 183, opposed, 0, abstaining, 1. That item has carried. There being no further business to come before the meeting and absent objection, the meeting stands adjourned upon unanimous consent. Thank you all for coming. Have a safe trip home. Have a wonderful St. Patrick's Day, and maybe you too can kiss the Blarney Stone.